All right, one of the most important concepts that we're going to be talking about in the class is order of operations. So let's take a look at an example and see why it's so important. What we have here is a problem that we just wrote out twice. It's the same problem on both sides. And just please notice between the 6 and the 2, we have parentheses, and that does imply multiplication. So anytime you have a number right beside a grouping symbol, it means to multiply. So let's go ahead and look at the two different ways we could work this problem out. We have 12 divided by 6 times 2. Let's say that we opt for the multiplication first. That would give us 12, and then 6 times 2 is 12. So now we have 12 divided by 12, and that would give us 1. Over on this side, let's go ahead and take care of the division first. We have 12 divided by 6, which is 2. Bring down the other 2, that makes 2 times 2, which is 4. So as you can see that we worked the problem out differently, and we got two different answers. Now only one of these can be correct, and it happens to be the one on the right-hand side. So let's go ahead now and talk about the order of operations, and we'll find out why the one on the right is correct. What a lot of people do is that they memorize the little jingle here that please excuse my dear Aunt Sally or PEMDAS. Either way, they are the same things. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally uses the same letters to make up the PEMDAS that you see here. So what do they mean? And then we're going to talk about the order in which we work things out. Well, P means parentheses. It means actually working inside. This is actually really important, the word inside. So inside parentheses is where we're going to start. That is true with any other grouping symbols as well, whether they're the square brackets or the curly brackets that we see here, and even the absolute values. So work inside there first. That's the first important thing. What does E stand for? Well, E stands for exponents, and it also stands for square roots. They could be any type of root for that matter, like a cube root, a fourth or fifth root, something like that. So exponents are next. And what about M? What does M stand for? That's multiplication. D stands for division. A is addition, and the S is subtraction. So this is why PEMDAS could get confusing, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally for that matter, is because when you're reading this, we're reading from left to right, and you think this is the order in which you have to do things. Well, the way that PEMDAS should be written should be like this. PEMDAS. And I'll put these numbers off to the side which refer to levels. The most important level is level 1. So this is how you're supposed to work things out. Work inside the parentheses first. That's the most important thing. What's next? Next are the exponents and the roots. The third most important thing is multiplication and division. Now here's the deal. Here's the way I like to explain this. If I'm in a classroom and I ask my students who's the most important person in this classroom, a lot of the students would say it's them. They are the most important people in the class, or individually they are the most important persons in the class. And then some students would say that the instructor is the most important person. And I like to use that analogy because it shows that this makes sense, where nobody in that classroom is more important than the other person. We're all equally important. And that's the same thing with multiplication and division. They're equally important, so we have to work from left to right. Think of this in the classroom. My job is to teach. Students' jobs are to learn. So we have different functions, but we're equally important. It's the same thing with multiplication and division. Multiplication and division have their own separate functions, but they're equally important. And because they're equally important, we have to work them from left to right. The same thing applies to addition and subtraction. They're equally important. We need to work those from left to right. So in the example that we looked at above, when you look at this, you say, what operations are going on? We have division and multiplication. Which one's more important? Well, division in this example, because it's first, going from left to right. So on the one on the left, the person did the multiplication first. The one on the right, the person did correctly. They went from left to right, doing the division first. So let's go ahead and take a look at some examples of working on simplifying expressions.